Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and this is our off-road POV for the Raptor. This is my bypass trail, I guess is what we'll call it, to get over to the rock crawl section. So I basically film some courses, well, my first part of the off-road course, and then I go through this with most vehicles for our point of view, and then I get to my rock crawling course and, you know, take the vehicle through that. Now, this course is typically reserved for mid-sized trucks and SUVs, obviously not full-size SUVs, but smaller size SUVs like the 4Runner and all that kind of stuff, because this trail is so tight. But this is my personal Raptor, and I have already scratched the living something out of the wrap on the Raptor. That's why I wrapped it, by the way, so that I wouldn't scratch the paint. And so I don't really feel too bad about going, and I just killed a bug right there. I don't really feel too bad about going through a tight trail like this in the Raptor. Man, this is so bumpy. So I've gone through this trail in so many vehicles, and every single vehicle gets really bumpy in this trail, and I've always wondered, like, hey, is it the tires? Is it the trail? Is it the vehicle? And it's definitely the trail. Like, even with these 37s, it's pretty bumpy. Now, I do need to mention something. I do have the tire pressure set in the high 30s, which is not great for off-roading. You usually want to go low 20s with the Raptor when you go off-road, but this is honestly just an impromptu review that I'm doing today, just taking the Raptor through the off-road course quickly, and then I'm heading back home. And I still don't have an air compressor, and so yeah, I really don't feel like airing down, and this should be fine because 13.1 inches of ground clearance here with the Raptor. Ooh. But one thing I will mention is on a smaller trail like this, which, by the way, this is pretty typical, I've found, in terms of trail sizes for most just off-road trails out there. The Raptor feels just massive. It takes up the whole trail. You can't really maneuver around things. You basically just have to figure out how you're going to go over them. But again, it's got a ton of ground clearance. It's got 37s, and so it does a really good job. Now, the benefit of 37s over grip is just how cushy they make the ride. Even aired up like this, is still a very comfortable ride. Like in a normal car, it's going to be like, you know, reconstructive back surgery basically afterwards. But, you know, the point that I wanted to make here with the Raptor is this is kind of just, you know, a show of the downside of this truck, because it's so amazing in wide open terrain, and if it can fit on an obstacle, it can pretty much climb up it, right? But the second that things get tight, right, it's a whole nother situation. And the new Bronco Raptor is just as wide as this F-150 Raptor, pretty much. And so you're gonna run into the same problem with trails. And so, you know, as cool as the Raptors are, there is that downside to them from an off-road perspective when you're just wanting to go down trails and have fun. And, you know, I've talked about this a lot on other off-road videos, is I feel like this is kind of what a lot of people like to do, is just go on some, you know, back trails like this. I don't have to call them back roads, but they're not really, this is not really a road. It kind of is. And just explore, right? And, you know, this truck can do it to an extent. If you live here in the desert, you know, you're probably going to be fine for most trails. But, you know, if you're on the east coast of the US, Colorado, you know, just I feel like anywhere other than like Utah, Nevada, New Mexico, and Arizona, if you're like anywhere outside of those states pretty much, that, you know, the truck just is gonna struggle because of the width. Man, this trail is so bumpy. Talk about, you know, testing out a vehicle's suspension. I cannot imagine doing this in a vehicle that does not have off-road tires and off-road shocks. I mean, it would just, you know, most new cars are unibody, independent suspension. And, you know, independent suspension does help out a little bit with getting out some of those bumps so it doesn't transfer across. Like this has a solid rear axle, so it transfers across, but oh man, it is jittery. But as you guys can see, and I am in 4-wheel high, by the way, you know, as long as you can, as TFL always says, thread the needle, right? As long as you can fit the Raptor through the trail, it'll go through it. And 37-inch tall tires are so big. You know, after these, gosh, it's so bumpy. After these last few months of doing like intensive off-roading to improve my off-road skill and to get you guys more off-road reviews, I've kind of discovered that anything above 37s is frankly just overkill, because with 37s, you get a nice cushy ride, tons of ground clearance. There's a scrape on the side of the truck. again, on the wrap. It's already scratched. Yeah, nice cushy ride, tons of ground clearance, like more than enough ground clearance to clear most obstacles comfortably to where you're not going to damage your vehicle. But you still have, you're still in that like range to where some obstacles are going to be challenging. Like you're actually going to have to like line things up and everything. Because, you know, once you go up to like, 38s are just a little bit bigger, not that much bigger, but once you go up to like 40s or above, the tires are so big, the ground clearance is so much that you just don't have to try. And it makes off-roading boring, frankly. And you have to like go to Moab or just, you know, crazy places to be able to find anything to really challenge your vehicle. And you know, I think off-roading is all about, you know, finding, you know, some level of challenge to where you're gonna push yourself as a driver and get better, but then also, you know, making it home in one piece. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. In a regular vehicle, I could pretty much avoid these gigantic rocks. But in the Raptor, you know, I at least have to go over one or the other, which is fine because I have the ground clearance. I've got the approach, departure, and breakover angles to make it over. But you know, it's nice sometimes when, especially if you're just going on a leisurely drive, to just avoid the crazy stuff. Again, those rocks weren't too much. Again, the Raptor definitely makes things seem like a lot less than they are. And that's one of the things that's kind of, I guess, boring about this truck sometimes, is like, it just handles everything so well. But again, if you're just going for a leisurely drive with your family or something like that, then yeah, it's nice. It's nice having that much capability to where like it makes it seem like it's nothing, so that, you know, the wife doesn't freak out and the kids don't freak out, right? And so, yeah, sorry if I'm not going to talk as much this section. It's just tighter. Don't want to run myself into a tree. Now, one thing I do need to talk about that I don't recommend you guys doing is doing what I do, which is I go through these off-road reviews typically by myself. You know, it's usually hard to find people to go with me during the time of week that I go, because, you know, everyone's got full-time jobs. And so, you know, that's something you definitely don't want to do in case you get stuck or something. But that's also why I do these off-road reviews in the same trails every single time, because I do these trails that I know that there's at least enough traffic that if I got stranded, that someone would probably come through. But then also, you know, everyone knows that I'm here, so like if something happened, you know, they'd know, okay, it's Ben's on his off-road course, so we know where to go, rather than, you know, if I'm out in the middle of nowhere. And again, you guys can hear the trees going against the side of the truck, and this is why I recommend, you know, vinyl wrap or paint protection film. I'm kind of leaning more towards the paint protection film side of things nowadays, because it is more expensive, but you know, it's so much thicker, and so it provides more protection. The vinyl wrap is fine for like the sides of the vehicles, because typically you don't have big impacts on the sides. Most of the big impacts are on the front of the vehicle off-road in terms of like debris and stuff. But that extra thickness definitely just helps out in terms of absorbing everything. But yeah, so far, I mean, hopefully you guys are enjoying this little trail adventure. And also, the reason I'm doing this with the Raptor again is I just like to see how, you know, pretty much the craziest off-roader can go through something like this, so that when I take, you know, entry-level off-roaders, like, you know, for example, I had that Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe Overland with the off-road package, right? And I didn't take it through this course because I didn't think it was going to make it, frankly. And the reason I think I was making it is this stuff right here. I struggled so much with that vehicle with the tire grip, because, you know, it has independent suspension front and rear, and so you're constantly popping wheels up in the air, and then on top of that, the tires don't get that much grip, even with those off-road tires, the same off-road tires on the Trailhawk. And this is where I knew, like, so this hill is like 20-something degrees. Oh, it's a Hawk. This hill is like 20-something degrees, and, you know, since that Grand Cherokee didn't make up the sandy hill, I was like, there is no way that it is going to make it up that hill right there with all the sand and everything. And I was like, I would probably have to back out and then potentially get stuck somewhere else. And I'm like, you know what? I'd rather not have to make the call to Jeep. Now, This is another hill that, well, I mentioned this in my review here of the Raptors going to the main channel. This is hills like this. Don't feel bad if you use something like hill descent control, because you know the last thing that you want is to run away and fly up a hill, right? So if you're not familiar with the terrain, I recommend, you know, if you've got it, use it the first time, and then you can go through it again and, you know, flex on everyone that you don't have to use the computers and everything. But like right here, if I lost control, it's just a straight shoot down the rest of the mountain, and you know, the initial part's just some bushes and everything, but then it ends, you'd pretty much end up into one of those trees, and then your vehicle's totaled, and you know, who knows what's going to happen to you. Now again, these 37s, really good grip. We're gonna pop it back in automatic mode now. They get really good grips, there's no sliding, but most vehicles that I've taken through that have 33-inch tall tires, or even 32s to 31s, and they all slip down that hill because they just don't have the width. This, you know, the Raptor being so wide with the track and then super wide with the tires, 315 millimeters wide with the tires, helps out a lot. That's another thing with off-roading, right, is just tires are so important. I know I've kind of talked about it through a large portion of the video, but that's something I've discovered with all these vehicles is it doesn't matter how advanced the you know, the four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive system is. It doesn't matter how techy the air suspension is. If the vehicle does not have good tires, it's not gonna make it through stuff. If you throw just solid tires, like this has, what are these, the 37-inch KO2s, or like the TRX has like the Wrangler, I think they're Duratrax, I can't remember. But anyways, if you just have solid tires that are relatively large in size, then you're going to be able to make it through a lot of stuff, and you're going to make it look pretty easy, as long as it's dry, right? And that's one of the benefits of the desert, is the fact that it's so dry. It makes it so that you can tackle crazy off-road obstacles that, you know, you can't necessarily tackle in a more, you know, wet climate, right? Like I see the videos of like TFL and some of these other journalists that will take vehicles through mud and stuff like that. Oh, the gate's closed. I'm gonna have to open the gate. And yeah, they just pretty much, they just get stuck and stuff that's not too difficult. So pro off-roading tip, if you see gates like that don't have locks on them and they're closed, then all you have to do is just open it, go through, as long as it's not private property, okay? Don't go on people's private property, but just open it, go through, and then make sure you close it on your way out. That's a mistake that I see a lot of people make with those, is they just don't close them on their way out. And, you know, it's closed for a reason. You know, sometimes it's, you know, sometimes it's like, you know, public land that's being used for grazing or whatever, and so, you know, it's maybe like a rancher or something like that that's trying to keep their cattle in a certain area. You know, there's a whole number of reasons why that gate would be closed. And so, yeah, just yeah, do that. And then, you know, obviously if you see something like that open, then you just kind of inspect it, right? If you're coming through and it's already open, just kind of inspect it and see if it's, you know, if it's got a lock and everything, then yeah, don't lock it, because, you know, obviously you don't have a key, and you don't know if that's something that, like, you know, the Forest Service or something like that is doing. But if it doesn't have a lock, if it's just like a little chain that's holding it together, then yeah, just, I mean, there's no harm in closing it, because then the next person that comes through can just open it up very, very easily, right? But, you know, what I've noticed is typically if it is private property, right, it's typically well marked, and they'll usually use locks, right? They won't, and so obviously don't go and, you know, get some pliers or whatever, or bolt cutters, right? But this kind of shows like the high speed ability of the Raptor, and some of this I gotta slow down for, because the dips are pretty big. But yeah, those new Fox shocks do an amazing job. And so the Raptor, you know, despite, you know, everyone seeing it as like a Baja vehicle, can do everything. Like I said, the only downside to this truck is just the width. And I know that I sound like a broken record at this point, but that's just kind of how it goes. So, you know, as long as you can fit, seems like you are good to go. Man, where am I going? Oh, and one thing, another like off-road tip is, you know, if you're not gonna be doing any jumping or anything, which I don't think most people jump their vehicles, I know that's kind of like a Ben Hardy thing, raise your seat up. So obviously if you're gonna be jumping, you want your seat a little bit lower down so that you don't hit the top of the vehicle. But if you're doing kind of more slow speed type off-roading, then basically just, you know, have your seat a little bit higher so you can see all around you, have that, you know, command type view of the terrain, and it definitely helps out. But anyways, I gotta find my way back to where I'm going, and well, see ya.